bless my soul. It's Lisa.
Hi.
You guys ready to play a little music here?
No.
Not you and you guys would be out there.
Well, you know, that's what we get paid the big bucks.
But no,
You guys will never guess what I was just doing. Oh, wait a minute. Hey, nice tree there, Lisa.
Oh, thanks. Oh.
how about a G there, Liz?
Gee. You want a clean
I'll take it.
Well, let's see, G.
feet are dragging. Give me a lift and I'll lay your wagon.
Love is a rose, but you better not pick it. It only grows when it's on the vine. Handful of thorns, and you know that you miss it. You lose your love when you say the word fine.
Love never seen, it's never been seen. Wanna live that age-old dream. Let's go together, let's take the best right now.
Love is a rose, but you better not pick it. It only grows when it's on the vine. Handful of thorns, and you know that you missed it. You lose your love when you say the word mine. Love is a rose. Love is a rose. Love is a rose, but you better not pick it. It only grows when it's on the vine. Handful of thorns, and you know that you missed it. You lose your love when you say the word mine. Love is a rose. Love is a rose. Love is a rose. Love is a rose.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We needed that. Oh, yes. Speaking of which, I ever tell you about my grandmother?
No, I don't believe that you did ever tell me about your grandmother.
Well, here, maybe this song shall explain. When I was a little bitty boy, just a walk from the floor, used to go down to Grandma's house every month in December. We had chicken pie, country ham, homemade butter on the bread. But the best part thing about Grandma's house was a great big feather bed.
But it was 9 feet high, 6 feet wide, soft as a downy chick. And it was made from the feathers of 4 that geese took a whole bunch of hot for a tick. And it hold eight kids and 4 hound dogs and a piggy we stole from the shed. We didn't get much sleep, but we had a lot of fun on Grandma's feather bed.
After supper, we'd sit around the fire, the old folks would split and shoot. All would talk about the farm and the war, and Granny sing about it or two. Well, I'd sit and listen, watch the fire till the cobwebs filled my head. Next thing I'd know, I'd wake up in the morning in the middle of the old feather bed.
It was 9 feet high, 6 feet wide, soft as a downy chick. And it was made from the feathers of 4 that geese took a whole bunch of hot for a tick. And it hold 8 kids and 4 hound dogs and a baby we stole from the shed. I didn't get much sleep, but I had a lot of fun on Grandma's feather bed.
Well, I love my mom, I love my pa, I love Granny and Grandpa too. I've been fishing with my uncle, I wrestled with my cousin, I even kissed Aunt Lou. But if I had to make a choice, I guess it ought to be said that I'd trade them all, plus a gal down the road for Grandma's feather bed. Yes, I'd trade them all, plus a gal down the road. I'll tell you something about that gal down the road.
Well, it was 9 feet high, 6 feet wide, soft as a downy chick. And it was made from the feathers of 4 that geese took a whole bunch of hot for a tick. And it hold 8 kids and 4 hound dogs and a piggy we stole from the shed. We didn't get much sleep, but we had a lot of fun on Grandma's feather bed. No, we didn't get much sleep, but we had a lot of fun on Grandma's feather bed.
you swept him away on your dreams of plenty, and he lived in your promise till he died. So come along, stand strong to the steamboat Mary, and sing along, we're all coming aboard for a ride on this wide and golden river, and we won't be coming back till we're finished with our song. Come along, stand strong to the steamboat Mary, and sing along, that we're all coming aboard for a ride on this wide and golden river, and we won't be coming back till we're finished with our song. I lay my head on her banks of clover, and curl your heart in its mighty tide, and I swear in your eyes I saw the clouds turn over, and trees were bleeding blue for the sky. So come along, stand strong to the steamboat Mary, and sing along, that we're all coming aboard for a ride on this wide and golden river, and we won't be coming back till we're finished with our song. Yeah!
Ladies and gentlemen, we wish to proudly introduce you to a rambler,
A storyteller.
a prospector,
And a failure.
A riverboat captain. A newspaper man.
a lecturer,
A liar.
A deserter.
A recluse.
and a world citizen.
Outrageous and boisterous.
Honest and violent.
A great American.
And one of America's most profound writers. One who owns the distinction of being the first writer ever to really discover America.
And by doing so, start a literary controversy which to this day has not been resolved.
May we introduce Mr. Thomas Jefferson Snodgrass.
Mr. W. Epaminondas Adastus Bland.
Sergeant Fallow. And Josh. All of them. And none of them.
Are the same man, Samuel Langhorne Clemens.
I consider introductions unnecessary, but if it is the custom to have them, I prefer to do the act myself, because I can rely on getting all the facts. There is a gentleman I wish to present you, a man whose great learning and veneration for the truth are exceeded only by his high moral character and majestic presence. I'm referring in very general terms to myself. I was born modest, but it wore off. I was once presented to an audience by a lawyer. He introduced me as a humorist who is really funny, a very rare creature indeed. Why, I was struck speechless by the complimentary thunderbolt. I'd scarcely in my lifetime listened to a compliment so beautifully phrased, or so well deserved. Now here is the compliment of a little Montana girl which came to me indirectly. She was in a room in which there was a large photograph of me on the wall. After gazing at it steadily for a time, she said, "We have a picture of John the Baptist, too. Only ours has more trimmings." I suppose she meant the halo. Oh, but I do like compliments. Why, we all do. Humorists, burglars, congressmen, all of us in the trade. The plan in the newspaper is good. If you can't get a compliment any other way, pay yourself one. I do that often. I can do that right now. I can state that there are, at this moment, two great men who are most remarkable. Kipling is one, and I am the other one. Between us, we cover all knowledge. He knows all that can be known, and I know all the rest. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you won't mind if I smoke. I believe there is a commandment against smoking during insurrections of this dignified nature. But I am working to get it removed. Mind you, I have no objections to abstinence, so long as it doesn't harm anybody. I practice it myself on occasion. I make it a rule never to smoke when asleep. Not that I care much for moderation myself. I do it as an example to others, and to prove that I am not a slave to the habit. I can give it up whenever I want to. Well, I've done it 1,000 times. I am a native to Missouri. The first crop of children was born in the mountains of East Tennessee. I was of a later vintage. I was postponed to Missouri. Missouri was a new and unknown state and needed attractions. When I was a young man, studying for the gallows, I went west on the Oakland stage to seek my fortune in the silver land of the Nevada Territory. A few days out of Salt Lake, we crossed the Carson. A sickly little rivulet, astonishingly referred to as a river. People accustomed to the monster, mile-wide Mississippi grow accustomed to associating the term river with a high degree of water grandeur. Why, if the Carson was my river, I wouldn't leave it outdoors at night, such a careless way, where any dog could come along and lap it up. One of the pleasantest and most invigorating exercises one can contrive is to run and jump across the Carson until he's overheated, and then drink it dry. Like everyone else, I was smitten with silver fever. So I went prospecting. I confess without shame, I expected to see masses of silver lying all about the ground. I expected to see it glittering in the sun on the mountain summits. I said nothing about this, as some instinct told me I might possibly have an exaggerated idea about it. By and by, in the bed of a shallow rivulet, I found a deposit of shining yellow scales. And my breath almost forsook me. A gold mine. And in my simplicity, I had been content with vulgar silver. I made my way back to camp and tossed the treasure in front of Mr. Ballou, one of my fellow prospectors, a man whose knowledge and understanding in such matters was not to be underrated. I asked him what he thought of my miraculous discovery.
Think of it? Well, I think it's nothing but a bunch of granite, rubbish, and nasty glittering mica that isn't worth 10 cents an acre.
So vanished my dream. So melted my wealth. Moralizing, I then observed that all that glitters is not gold. Mr. Ballou said I could take it even further than that and lay it up among my treasures of knowledge that nothing that glitters is gold. So I learned then, once and for all, that gold in its native state is but dull, unornamental stuff, and that only low-born metals excite the admiration of the ignorant with an ostentatious glitter. However, like the rest of the world, I still go on underrating men of gold while glorifying men of mica. Commonplace human nature cannot rise above that. I eventually settled down in Virginia City, which is a good place for a man to lose his religion. If he hasn't any left by then. It was no place for a Presbyterian. And I didn't remain one very long.
Give me one!
There were wide open gambling places, murders, street fights, riots every 16 steps, half a dozen jails, and some talk of building a church.
Never!
interviewed the king of the Sandwich Islands. He said, "We understand Christianity. We have eaten the missionaries." I suppose my warmest memories are of my boyhood in Missouri. I remember the Mississippi River. I used to be drowned in it regularly, every year, and then fished out and drained out, inflated and set going again by some chance enemy of the human race. But it never seemed to bother my mother. She would just smile and say, "People born to be hanged are safe in water." Now and again, we hope that if we lived, and were good, God would permit us to be pirates.
Years later, as the pilot on a riverboat, Twain learned the river well, for hidden sandbars and sunken logs often made riverboat travel treacherous.
It was the job of the boat's leadsman to make continual soundings.
If the depth of the river was safe for crossing,
If the depth of the river was 2 fathoms deep,
Well, now that's 12 feet. The leadsman would cry up to the pilot, "Mark Twain! Mark Twain! We're in safe water!"
Mark Twain, it's 2 fathoms deep below. Oh, Mark Twain, Northern anchors at the shore. Mark Twain, play those banjos as we go down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico.
an easy ride down the majestic Mississippi was often accompanied by shows, minor theatrical adventures, and music for the entertainment of the passenger.
But often when the boat landed in port, people from nearby towns would be waiting to board the ship and to see the shows.
Although not always of the highest caliber, the exuberance and fun of the old river show was well worth a few pennies or eggs or chicken.
Or milk.
Which was charged for admission. One of the most popular shows at the time was the old-time minstrel show.
Camptown baby, sing the song, doo-da, doo-da. Camptown racetracks, farmhouse, oh, doo-da day. One roll all day. Get my money off your hands, all day. One roll all day. Get my money off your hands, all day.
Very nice, Mr. Dodo. Very rich indeed. Why, anyone would have thought that you had studied music in some foreign country.
I did.
Really? In what foreign country did you study music?
Greece.
Well, that's certainly news to me. You were in Greece.
Yes, sir.
What city were you in?
Axel. Uh-huh. Axel, Greece.
So, is that where you studied music, Mr. Bones?
Oh, my, no, that was in Cuba.
Cuba isn't in Greece.
No, but it's
jump off. Then I says to myself, don't do it. And I didn't.
Oh, I see. And you consider yourself a hero for that.
Oh, not for that. I'm a hero because I went back home and told my wife I didn't do it. After I promised her I would do it.
Doesn't she realize how hard it is to find a good husband?
She even realizes how impossible it is.
Say, Sambo, I understand you're having a little mother-in-law trouble.
Yes, that's true. My father had mother-in-law trouble too.
Now, don't give me that. I remember that your father went to great expense just to place a big old tombstone on her grave when she passed away.
Yes, he wanted to be sure she wouldn't be able to lift it.
Sambo, what epitaph did your father have inscribed on her tombstone?
Oh, Lord, here lies the body of Mary O'Toole, who died from the kick of a Missouri mule.
Is that all of it?
No, one more line.
What was it?
Well done, thou good and faithful servant.
Rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham. Rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham. Rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham. Oh, rock my soul. So high you can't get over it. So low you can't get under it. So wide you can't go round it. Oh, rock my soul. Rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham. Rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham. Rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham. Oh, rock my soul. Oh, rock my soul. Oh, rock my soul. Oh, rock my soul.
Now, this type of frontier and riverboat experiences with low-grade theatrics took center stage in the adventures of Huckleberry Finn.
In this chapter, two preposterous con men, referred to as the Duke and the King, met up with Huck and Jim, the runaway slave, sailing on a raft down the Mississippi River. They fancied themselves actors and called themselves David Garrick, the younger, and Edmund Kean, the elder, the world-renowned tragedians. Trying to clip unsuspecting spectators, they traveled down the river, going from town to town, putting on shows in which they butchered Shakespeare. In this little scene, the two actors are planning their next tour in the grandest style for the benefit of Huck.
Well, we'll want to make this a first-class show, you know. So I guess we'll add a little more to it. We'll want a little something to answer encores with anyway. Let's see. I'll answer by doing a Highland Fling or the Sailor's Hornpipe. And you... see. Murray! I've got it! You can do Hamlet's soliloquy.
Hamlet's which?
Hamlet's soliloquy! Why, the most celebrated thing in Shakespeare. Ah, it's sublime. Always fetches the house. See, I haven't got it in the book. I've only got one volume. But I reckon I can piece it out of memory. I'll just walk up and down here a moment and see if I can call it back from Recollections vaults.
So he went to marching up and down and thinking and frowning horrible.
Oh,
Every now and again, he'd hoist up his eyebrows, squeeze his hand on his forehead, stagger back, kind of moan. Then he would sigh. Next, he'd let on to a drop of tear. Why, it was beautiful to see him. By and by, he got it. He told us to give attention and struck a most noble attitude, with a 1 foot shoved forward and his arms way up in the air and his head tilted back. This is a speech. I learned it easy enough when he was learning it to the king.
yeah! To be or not to be. That is the bare bodkin that makes calamity of such long life. For who would fardels bear till Burnham Wood do come to Dunsinane? Oh, but the fear of something after death murders innocent sleep. Great nature's second course, and makes us rather sling the arrows of outrageous fortune than to fly to others that we know not of. There's the respect must give us pause. Wake, Duncan, with thy knocking! I wouldest thou couldest, but who could bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the law's delay, and the quietus in which its pains might take in the dead waste and middle of the night, when churchyards yawn. In customary suits of solemn black, but that whose undiscovered country, born, no traveler returns, breathes forth contagion on the world. And thus, the native hue of resolution, like the poor cat in the adage, is sickled o'er with care. And all the clouds that lume o'er our housetops will disregard their currents, turn awry, and lose the name of action. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. Oh, but sought you the fair Ophelia? Ope not thy ponderous and marble jaws, Cowards, get thee to a nunnery! Go!
Well, that night we had our show. But there weren't but 12 people there. Just enough to pay expenses. And they all laughed, and that made the Duke mad. And they all left before the show was over. All except one boy, which was asleep. So the Duke said these Arkansas lunkheads couldn't come up to Shakespeare. What they wanted was low comedy, he reckoned. He said he could size their style. So the next morning, he got big sheets of wrapping paper and black paint and went to posting handbills all over the village. And the bill said,
At the courthouse, for 3 nights only, the world-renowned tragedians, David Garrick the Younger, and Edmund Kean the Elder, of the London and Continental Theatres in the thrilling tragedy of The King's Camelopard, or The Royal Nonsuch. Admission 50 cents.
down at the bottom was the biggest line of all, which said,
Ladies and children, not admitted. There. If that line don't fetch 'em, I don't know Arkansas.
well, the next day, him and the king were hard at it, rigging up the stage and a curtain and a whole row of candles with footlights. And that night, the house was jam-packed full of men in no time. And when the place couldn't hold no more, the Duke, he come out on the stage and he praised up here this tragedy, saying that it was the most thrillingest one that ever was. And he went on bragging about the tragedy and about Edmund Kean the Elder, which was to play the main principal role in it. And when he had finished and he got their expectations up high enough, he rolled up the curtain. And out came the king, prancing out on all fours. Naked. And he was all painted up and ring-striped. All sorts of things. As pretty as a rainbow. And, well, never mind the rest of his costume. It was just wild. It was awful funny. Most people just about killed themselves laughing. Why, when he was gotten done and he capered off behind the scenes, they clapped and cheered and ha-ha, and then he'd come out and do it again. And after that, they made him do it another time. Why, it would have made a cow laugh to see the shines that old idiot cut. Well, when all that got done, the Duke, he come out and he said that the great tragedy will be performed only 2 nights more on account of pressing London engagements in which the seats is already sold out for it in Drury Lane. Well, and he said if he had succeeded in pleasing them, he would be deeply obliged if they would tell their friends to come and see the show. What kind of a show? And then 20 people sing out. What? Is it all? Is that all? I can't believe it. Duke says yes. And then there was a fine time. People rose up out of their chairs and yelled sold and went for that stage and then tried to until one big, fine-looking man jumps up on a bench and shouts,
Hold on. Just a word, gentlemen. We are sold. Mighty badly sold.
Right.
But we don't want to be the laughing stock of this whole town, I reckon. Never hear the last of this thing as long as we live. No. What we want is right here quiet and talk this show up and sell the rest of the town. Ain't that sensible? All right then. Not a word about the sell. Go along home and invite everybody to come and see the tragedy.
Yeah, let's come the next day. You couldn't hear nothing around town but how splendid our show was. And that night, the house was crammed again. And we sold this crowd the same way. And the third night, the house was packed again. But this time it weren't no newcomers. It was people that had seen his show the other 2 nights. I stood by the Duke at the door, and I noticed that every man that went through the door had his pockets a-bulging or something muffled up under his coat. And there weren't no perfumery neither. Not by a long sight. I smelled sickly eggs by the barrel and rotten cabbages and such things. And if I know the signs of a dead cat being around, and I reckon I do, there were 64 of them that went through that door that night. I tried to shove my way in. But it was just 2 berries for me. Well, when the place couldn't hold no more, the Duke gave a boy a quarter and tell him to tend the door. and he starts off around to the stage door, me after him. When he gets around the corner, he stops and says,
Walk fast now till you get away from the houses. Then you shin for the rap like the Dickens was after you.
I done it, he done the same. We hit the rap at the same time. And in less than 2 seconds, we were gliding off down that river. Well, I reckon the king was in for a gaudy time back with the audience, but then he comes out from behind the wigwam and says,
Well, how'd the old thing pan out this time, Duke?
we hadn't hit uptown at all. And then the Duke says,
Greenhorns, flatheads. I knew the first house would keep mum and let the rest of the town get roped in. And I knew they'd lay for us the third night. And consider it was their turn now.
Them rapskillions took me $465 in them 3 nights. I've never seen money hauled in by the wagon load like that before. All kings is mostly rapskillions, as far as I can make out.
The river was a breeding ground for tales and rough, raw humor. But the peace of the river was interrupted by the blaze of the Civil War. My days on a riverboat had ended, and I was called to serve in the Confederate Army. I was brought up with the problem of slavery. My parents owned slaves. All along the river, their woeful wailing could be heard as they kept time by the clinking sounds of their chains as they worked. It was a most confusing time, what with the law on one side and a man's conscience on the other. Huckleberry had his problems with the issue too, you know. The boy had just escaped from his pap when he took on Miss Watson's runaway slave, Big Jim.
I promised I wouldn't tell on him. I know what I've done wrong. Me and Jim, we found the old section of a log raft and just set off down that river. We just let that raft float wherever the current wanted it to. We'd lay out on our backs, smoke our pipes, stare up at the sky. But for how a body can hear the river at night, and every now and again, I'd see a steamboat slipping along in the night. And then she'd belch a whole world of sparks up out of her chimney. It'd rain down to the river. I'd go to sleep at night. Jim's crying at wake me. He'd just be sitting there with his head betwixt his knees, moaning. And Jim says to me, Huck, you know what I'm going to do first thing when I get to a free state? Is I'm going to go to work hard, saving up my money, and then I'm going to buy my wife. When we both save our money, we buy the 2 children. And if they're massing, put and sell them, well, then we get an abolitionist to free them for them. Why, it froze me to hear such talk. There I was thinking that Jim was most free and who was to blame for it. Why? Me. I just felt sick. There I was padding off in a sweat to tell on him, but when he said that, it just sort of took the tuck right out of me. Wasn't sure if I wanted to do it anymore. But then I said to myself, I got to do it. I can't get out of it. Then along comes a skiff with 2 men in it, with guns. And one of them says,
What's that yonder? Face her out. You wrong on it?
Yes, sir.
Any men on it?
Well, only one, sir.
Well, there's 5 sleds ran off tonight, up yonder, around the head of the bend. Is your man white or black?
He's white. I know they've done wrong. I figure, what's the use of me trying to learn to do right anyway? Body that just don't get started when he's young just ain't got no shoulder. And I says to myself, hold. Would I feel any better if I'd have done right and turned Jim in? No, says I. I feel bad. I feel the same way I do now. Well then, says I, what's the use of trying to learn to do right when it's troublesome to do right and it ain't no trouble to do wrong? I was stuck. I couldn't answer that.
I eventually solved the issue within myself by retiring from the Confederacy after only 2 weeks. And the Confederacy promptly lost the war. I suppose man's most inspiring contribution to history is his art. I used to worship the mighty genius of Michelangelo, that man who was great in everything he undertook. But I do not want Michelangelo for breakfast, for luncheon, for tea, for dinner, for between meals. I like a change occasionally. In Genoa, he designed everything. In Milan, he or his pupils designed everything. In Padua, Verona, Venice, Bologna, who did we ever hear of from guides but Michelangelo? I never felt so fervently thankful, so soothed, so tranquil, so filled with a blessed peace as I did yesterday, when I learned that Michelangelo was dead. But we have taken it out of this guide. He has marched us through miles of picture and sculpture in the vast corridors of the Vatican. He shows us a figure and says, "Statue Brunzo." We look at it indifferently, and the doctor asks,
By Michelangelo?
No. Then he shows us the ancient Roman Forum.
Oh, Michelangelo!
No, 1,000 years before he is born.
Then an Egyptian obelisk.
Ah, Michelangelo!
Oh, mon Dieu, that's 2,000 years before he is born.
The guides in Genoa are delighted to secure an American party because Americans so much wonder and deal so much in sentiment and emotion before any relic of Columbus. Our guide here fidgeted about as if he had swallowed a spring mattress.
Come with me. I'll show you the letter writings of Christopher Colombo, who writing himself with his own hands. Come!
He took us to the municipal palace, and after much impressive fumbling of keys and opening of locks, the aged and stained document was spread out before us. The guide's eyes sparkled. He danced about us and tapped the parchment with his fingers.
See what I tell you? Is it not so? Is it letter writings of Christopher Colombo?
We looked indifferent, unconcerned. Then the doc examined the document very deliberately, and then she said, without any show of interest,
Oh, Ferguson, what did you say was the name of the party that wrote that?
Christopher Colombo! The great Christopher Colombo!
Well, did he write it himself or how? fools by a good deal. Now, if you have got any specimens of penmanship on real merit, trot them out. If you haven't, drive on.
We drove on. The guide was bewildered. But he had something which he thought would overcome us. He said,
You come with me. I'll show you beautiful, magnificent bust of Christopher Colombo. Splendid, grand, magnificent.
he took us before the beautiful bust, for it was beautiful, and then sprung back and struck an attitude.
Look, beautiful grand bust of Christopher Colombo. Beautiful bust, beautiful pedestal.
The doc put up her eyeglasses, procured for just such occasions.
What did you say this gentleman's name was?
Christopher Colombo, the great Christopher Colombo.
Christopher Colombo, the great Christopher Colombo. Well, what did he do?
Discover America! Discover America! Oh, see,
Discover America. No, that statement would hardly what? We're from America ourselves, and we heard nothing about it. Christopher Colombo. Pleasant name. Is he dead?
Corpo di Matco! Been dead 300 years!
Well, what did he die of?
I do not know. I cannot tell.
Smallpox thing?
I do not know. I do not know what he died of.
Measles likely.
Maybe. I do not know. I think he died of something.
Parents living?
Impossible!
Well, which is the bust and which is the pedestal?
Santa Maria! This is the bust! This is the pedestal!
I see. Happy combination. Very happy combination indeed. Is this the first time this gentleman was ever on a bust?
That joke was lost on the farm. Guides cannot master the subtleties of the American joke. Yesterday, we spent 3 or 4 hours in the Vatican, that wonderful world of curiosities. We came very near expressing interest, sometimes even admiration. It was very hard to keep from it. We succeeded, though. Nobody else ever had. Our guide was bewildered. We walked his legs off hunting up extraordinary things, but it was a failure. We never showed any interest in anything. He had saved what he had considered to be his greatest wonder till the last, a royal Egyptian mummy, the best preserved in the world, perhaps. He took us there. He was so sure this time, some of his old enthusiasm came back to him.
See? Mummy!
The eyeglasses came up as calmly, as deliberately as ever.
What did I understand you to say the gentleman's name was?
Name? He got no name. Mummy! Egyptian mummy!
Yes, born here?
No, Egyptian mummy!
Just so. Frenchman, I presume.
No, not Frenchman, not Roman, born in Egypt.
Born in Egypt. Never heard of Egypt before. Foreign locality likely. Mummy.
Is he dead? Sacre bleu! Been dead 3,000 years!
What do you mean by such conduct as this? Trying to impose your vile second-hand carcasses on us? Thunder and lightning, I've a mind to. If you've got a nice fresh corpse, fetch it out. Oh, by George, I'll brain you!
We'd make it exceedingly interesting for this Frenchman. We shall be sorry to part with him. We have enjoyed his society very much. We trust he has enjoyed ours, but we are harassed with doubt.
During the writing of The Innocents Abroad, aboard the ship the Quaker State, Twain saw the picture of the sister of one of his fellow travelers and fell madly in love.
He was determined to return from the continent and marry. Her name, Olivia Langdon.
She was as determined not to marry him, despite the hundreds of love letters she received from him.
They were married in 1870, and out of 35 years, their longest separation was 8 days.
The letters he wrote her were seldom heard. They are moving, poignant, and their tenderness contrasts with the sharpness of his sarcasm.
Libby, darling, 6 years have gone by since I made my first great success, and won you. Every day we live together adds to the security of my confidence that we can never more wish to be separated than we can imagine a regret that we were ever joined. You are dearer to me today, my child, than on the last anniversary of this birthday. You have grown more and more dear to me since the first of these anniversaries, and I do not doubt that this precious progression will continue on to the end. Let us look forward to the coming anniversaries, their age and their gray hairs, without fear and without depression, trusting that the love we bear each other will be sufficient to make them blessed. And so it is with abounding affection for you and our babies that I hail this day, which brings you to matronly grace and dignity of 3 decades.
Twain's marriage to Livy was a turning point in his career.
He seemed to write for her. Everything he ever penned was submitted to her for inspection and approval.
Behind lay the formative years in Twain's career. His adventures, the expedition, the wanderlust.
But ahead lay a staggering siege of events.
Honored by the luster of world fame.
Shaded by personal tragedy, falling into bankruptcy twice.
Yet revitalized by a brilliant series of lecture tours, which still entertain audiences of all ages.
And all of this is still to come.
Further down the river.
O Lord, we have with us tonight a man known throughout the world as the great American humorist. Help us, O Lord, help us to understand what he is about to say and be amused by it.
Being told I would be expected to talk here, I inquired as to what sort of talk I ought to make. They said it should be something suitable to youth, something instructive or in the nature of good advice. Very well. I have a few things in my mind which I have often longed to say for the instruction of the young, for it is in one's tender early years that these things will best take root and be most enduring and most valuable. First then, I say to you, my young friends, and I say it beseechingly, urgingly, always obey your parents when they're present. This is the best policy in the long run, because if you don't, they'll make you. Most parents think they know better than you, and you can generally make more by humoring that superstition than you can by acting on your own better judgment. Be respectful to your superiors, if you have any. Also to strangers, and sometimes to others. If a person offends you and you're in doubt as to whether or not it was intentional, do not resort to extreme measures. Simply watch your chance and hit him with a brick. That will be sufficient. Leave dynamite to the low and unrefined. In the matter of lying, you want to be very careful about lying. Otherwise, you're nearly sure to get caught. And once caught, you can never again be, in the eyes of the good and the pure, what you were before. Many a young person has injured himself permanently through a single, clumsy, ill-finished lie, the result of carelessness. Patience, diligence, painstaking attention to detail. These are the requirements. The loft and resounding maxim that truth is mighty and will prevail is the most majestic compound fracture of fact any born of woman has yet achieved. Any graceful, self-respecting liar will tell you that the truth is not hard to kill. But a lie well told is immortal. Never neglect your personal appearance. Fashion is important. Everywhere I've traveled, I've learned that the clothes make the man. Naked people have little or no influence in society. Why, look at me. I always dress in impeccable white. It's symbolic of my upstanding moral character. But to be very careful in choosing your friends and your enemies. It takes one of each working together to hurt you to the heart. Your enemy to slander you, and your friend to get the news to you. It has been my experience that in most cases the passion of friendship is so steady and loyal, sweet and enduring in nature, that it will last a whole lifetime. If not asked to lend money. I suppose, since I have just reached my 70th anniversary, I should mention some of the delicate arts and deep moralities I employed to climb to this great summit. I achieved my 70 years in the usual way. By sticking strictly to a scheme of life that would kill anyone else. I make it a rule never to smoke more than one cigar at a time. There's always been my rule never to smoke when asleep, and never to refrain when awake. What is a good rule? I mean, for me. But some of you know perfectly well that it wouldn't answer for everyone who's trying to get to 70. Also, I have lived a clean and decent life. You see, cowardice is the best protection against temptation. In the matter of diet, which is another thing I have been persistently strict in, sticking to those things which didn't agree with me until one or the other of us got the better of it. I have never taken any exercise, except sleeping and resting. and I never intend to. Exercise is loathsome. Quite simply, if you can't get to 70 by a comfortable path, don't go. But I have said enough. I hope you will treasure up these instructions which I have given you and make them a guide to your feet and a light to your understanding. Build your character thoughtfully and painstakingly upon these precepts, and by, when you have got it built, you will be surprised and gratified to see how nicely and sharply it resembles everybody else's.
Let me see it. Oh, it's ever so nice. I wish I could draw.
Oh, well, it's easy. I'll learn you.
Oh, will you?
Yeah, what's your name?
Becky Thatcher, what's yours? Oh, I know, it's Thomas Sawyer.
Well, that's the name they like me by. I'm Tom when I'm good.
What do you have? May I see?
Oh, no, it ain't anything.
Yes, it is.
Well, you tell.
Deed, deed, and double deed, I won't. Now let me. Oh, you bad thing!
Do you love rats?
No, I hate them.
Well, so do I, live ones. But I mean dead ones, to swing around your head with a string.
No, I don't care for rats much. Anyway, what I like's chewing gum.
Oh, I should say so. I wish I had some now.
Oh, do you? I've got some. You've been chewing for a while, but you must give it back to me.
Was you ever at a church?
Yes, my pa's gonna take me again sometime, if I'm good.
How about a circus? I've been to a circus 3 or 4 times, lots of times. Church ain't shucks to a circus. There's things happening at a circus all the time. Well, I'm going to be a clown at a circus when I grow up.
Oh, are you? They're so lovely, all spotted up.
Yes, that's so. And they get slathers of money, most $1 a day. Ben Rogers says. Say, Becky, was you ever engaged?
What's that?
Oh, I engaged to be married.
No,
Would you like to?
I guess so. I don't know, what's it like?
Like? Why, it ain't like anything. You only just tell a boy that you won't ever have anybody but him. Never, never, never. And then you kiss, and that's all. Why, anyone can do it.
Kiss? What do you kiss for?
Oh, well, it's to, you know, they always do that.
Everybody?
Yeah. Everybody that's in love with each other. Becky, do you remember what I wrote on that slate?
Yes.
What was it?
I shan't tell you.
Shall I tell you?
No, not now.
Please, Becky, I'll whisper it ever so easy. Now you whisper it to me, just the same.
You turn your face away so you can't see me, and then I will. But you mustn't ever tell anybody, will you, Tom? Now you won't, will you?
No, indeed I won't. Now, Becky.
I love you.
Now that's all done. All over but the kiss. Oh, but don't be afraid of that. It ain't anything. Please, Becky. Well, that's all done. And always after this, you ain't ever to marry anybody but me. And you ain't ever to love anybody but me. Never, never, and forever. Will you?
No, I'll never love but you, Tom. And I'll never marry anybody but you. And you ain't never to marry anybody but me either.
And you choose me, and I choose you at parties. Well, because that's what you do when you're engaged.
Oh, it's ever so nice. I never heard of it before.
Oh, why, it's ever so gay. Me and Amy Lawrence, we used to
Mom!
have it.
Then I ain't the first you ever been engaged.
Oh, Becky, don't cry. Well, I don't care for her anymore.
Yes, you do, Tom.
Oh, no.
You know you
Becky, won't you say something? I don't care for no one but you. Becky, won't you take it back?
Aunt Polly had a cure for everything, even love. When Tom fell in love and began to mope listlessly about the house, Aunt Polly, mistaking his love sickness for some other malady, tried the water treatment on him. She stood him up in the woodshed and drowned him with a deluge of cold water. Then she wrapped him up in a wet sheet, stuck him under some blankets till she sweated his soul clean. But the greatest number of cures has been recorded for the removal of the universal wart. Tom and Huck had their own brand of home remedies.
Say, Huck, what's a dead cat good for? Good for cure warts with.
No, is that so? Well, I know something's better.
I'll bet you don't. Well, what is it?
Why, spunk water.
Spunk water? I wouldn't give a darn for spunk water.
Oh, you wouldn't, would ya? Did you ever try it?
No, I ain't. Bob Tanner did.
Who told you so?
Why, he told Johnny Baker, and Johnny Baker told Jim Hollis, and Jim Hollis told Ben Rogers, and Ben Rogers told me. There.
Ah, so what of it? They all lie. Aw, shucks, Huck, tell me how he done it.
Why, I just walked up to an old stump where the rainwater was, shoved his hand.
In the daytime?
Certainly.
With his face to the stump?
Yeah, at least I reckon so.
Did he say anything?
I don't reckon he did. I don't know.
Ah, talk about trying to cure warts with spunk water. Such a blank fool way as that. That ain't gonna do any good, Huck. You gotta do it all by yourself. In the middle of the night. Where you know there's a spunk water stuck. And just as it's midnight, you back up against the stump and you jam your hand down in and you say, barleycorn, in Jamil Schultz. Spunk water, so waller these warts. Then you walk away quick 11 steps with your eyes closed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Then you turn around quick 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And then you walk away home without speaking to anybody. 'Cause, Huck, if you speak to somebody, then the charm's busted.
Well, that sounds like a good way to me. But that ain't the way Bob Tanner did it.
No, sir. You can bet he didn't. Why, 'cause he's the wartiest boy in town. He wouldn't have a wart on him if he knowed how to work spunk water. I play with so many frogs, I've got considerable many warts. Sometimes I take them off with a bean.
Yep, bean's good. I done that.
You have? Well, what's your way?
Well, you take it and you split the bean. And then you cut the wart, Huck, so as to get some blood. And then you squeeze the blood onto the piece of the bean, and you take it, you dig a hole, and bury it at midnight at the crossroads in the dark of the moon. And then you burn up the rest of the bean. That'll fetch any work.
Yeah, that'll do it, Huck.
No, Huck!
In some cases, I find it is better to keep one's mouth shut and appear stupid than it is to open it and remove all doubt. I will state here and now that it probably could be shown by facts and figures that there is no natively American criminal class. Except Congress. A senator is a man who makes laws in Washington when not doing time. The political and commercial morals of the United States are not merely food for laughter. They are an entire banquet. Now let's just suppose you were an idiot. And suppose you were a member of Congress. But I repeat myself, still there is something good and motherly about Washington. That grand old National Benevolent Asylum for the hopeless. They take care of their own. Nephews, brothers-in-law, poor relations. Bribery is expensive. They want to keep all that money in the family. Honesty is our most rapidly vanishing commodity. Let us try to economize it. Once when I returned from Europe, I found myself out of a job. So I hired a hall and gave a lecture. Also, I became acquainted with that great menace, the local interviewer. One of these villains came to me one time. She knocked on the door of my hotel room and announced that she was connected with the Daily Thunderstorm. My first impulse was to pulverize her with the chair. But she sat down in it before I could go into action. So I decided to try and confuse her. She started off, she said, now then, Mr. Twain, will you let me ask you certain questions calculated to bring out the important points in your public and private life? I have a very poor memory.
That's quite all right, as long as you do the best that you can.
Oh, I will. I will put my whole mind to it.
Thank you. Now, are you ready to begin?
Ready.
How old are you?
19. In June.
Indeed. I would have taken you to have been much older than that.
Thank you.
Where were you born?
Missouri.
And when did you first begin to write?
In 1836.
Now, how can that be if you're only 19 years old?
I don't know.
Who do you consider to be the most remarkable man that you've ever met?
I suppose George Washington.
George Washington. Now, how could you have ever met George Washington if you're only 19 years old?
Why, if you know more about me than I do, why'd you ask me for?
It was suggestion only. How did you happen to meet Mr. Washington?
I happened to be at his funeral one day, and he asked me to make less noise.
Good heavens! If you were at his funeral, he must have been dead. If he was dead, how could he have cared whether you made any noise or not?
Oh, he was always very particular in that way.
But still, you say he was dead, and yet he spoke to you.
Well, some said he was, yeah. Others said he wasn't.
Well, what did you think?
Why, it wasn't any of my business.
Well, now, let me ask you something else. Do you have any brothers or sisters?
Well, yes, I believe so, but I don't rightly remember at the moment.
That is the most extraordinary statement that I have ever... I know you had a brother. Haven't I read somewhere that you had?
Yes, of course. Now that you mention it, there was a brother, William. Bill, we used to call him. Poor old Bill.
Oh, was he dead?
We never could tell. There's always a very great mystery about that, you see.
Well, that's sad. He disappeared then, did he?
Well, he disappeared in sort of a general way, yes. We buried him.
You buried him. You mean to tell me that you buried him not knowing whether he was dead or not?
Oh, no. He was dead right enough. Always was pretty much dead. Now, you see, we were twins, Bill and I. And when we were only 2 weeks old, we got mixed up in the bathtub and one of us drowned. But we don't know which one. Some think it was Bill, and some think it was me.
Well, what do you think?
Oh, I'd give worlds to know. There was one peculiar thing about it, though. One of us had a curious mark. It was a mole on the back of his shoulder. That child was me. And that was a child that drowned. I am the only man living who understands human nature. God has put me in charge of this branch office. When I die, there will be no one here to take my place. I shall keep on doing my duty, however, for when I get over on the other side, I shall use my influence to have the human race drowned again. And this time drowned good. No omission, no arc. The statement that man is the only species with reasoning power is left open to doubt. I do know he's the only animal that blushes, or needs to. In the beginning, that was not necessary. Adam and Eve had no idea of sin. But with only one bite of the forbidden fruit, they learned to do various types of wrong things. But they did find time for other things, as this page from Eve's diary will explain.
The next great triumph for science myself. To wit, how the milk gets into the cow. Both of us have marveled over that mystery a long time. We have followed the cows around for years. That is, in the daytime. But never caught them drinking a fluid of that color. So at last we said, undoubtedly they procured it at night. And so we took turns and watched them at night. The result was the same. The mystery remained unsolved. And one night, as I lay musing, a grand idea flashed through my head. My first impulse was to wake Adam and tell him, but I resisted and kept it my secret. The moment the first pale streak of dawn appeared, I flitted stealthily away. And deep in the woods, I chose a grassy spot and fenced it in. I milked her dry and left her there a prisoner. There was nothing there to drink. She must get milk by her alchemy or stay dry. All day I was in a fidget. I could not talk connectedly. I was so preoccupied. Adam was busy inventing a multiplication table and didn't notice. Towards sunset, he got as far as 6 times 9 are 27. And while he was delirious with the joy of his achievement, intent to my presence, all things else, I stole away to cry cow. My hands shook some with excitement and dread failure that for some moments I couldn't get a grip on a teeth. And then I succeeded. And the milk came. 2 gallons. 2 gallons and nothing to make it out of. Well, I knew at once the explanation. The milk was not taken in by mouth.
He is a marvel, man. He is. Wish I knew who invented him. I have heard it said, and by learned men, that the world was created for man. That all these millions of years have just been in preparation for him. I don't think we ought to decide so soon. Not until all the returns are in. I could never get over the notion that in certain desperate and trying circumstances, profanity offers a relief denied even to prayer. So if I cannot swear in heaven, I shall probably not remain there. Probably won't let me in anyway. And now it is time to go. I came in 1835 with Halley's Comet. It's coming again soon, and I expect to go out with it. It will be the greatest disappointment of my life if I do not go out with Halley's Comet. The Almighty has no doubt said, now here are these two indefinable freaks. They came in together, they must go out together. Oh, I'm looking forward to that.
On April 20th, 1910, the night before Mark Twain's death, Halley's Comet shone in the skies.
The search had ended. The romance,
The adventure.
The quest, the tyrants.
the light of wisdom, the nobility of man.